Okay, well, welcome to all of you at home, and today we're going to be making the Never Fail rolls. If you copied the recipes that were in the handout that was attached to the class, it's on the very first page of recipes, Never Fail rolls. It's a good recipe, a good basic recipe. And the reason I chose it is because it has the ingredients, all the ingredients that I use in bread. Well, that's not true. I also often add seeds and whole grains, but it has the ingredients I wanted to talk about. And the reason I'm making bread today, I want you to see the technique, but I also want to talk about the brands of products that I like and the equipment that I like to use. And just because I say this is the flour I think you should use doesn't mean it's the best flour. It's the flour that, in my opinion, is the best, or just because I say these eggs are the best. We have Dixie here who might be giving us some input. She is a bread baker, and she might have things to add, or I hope she'll ask some questions, because that lets me know what I'm not covering or what I should be covering in the class. So if you have the recipe in front of you, and if you don't have it in front of you, that's just fine. And so that I don't forget, I've put my email address. I don't think it shows there, does it? I will slide it over there. I don't think you can see it. It's too small. But my email is brotebacher1@hotmail.com, and it's BROT, there it is, BACKER1@hotmail.com. So any questions that you have or requests for what you want us to do in class the 28th or the 11th of November, send me an email, but put something in the subject line so that I know it's about class. I don't open anything if I don't know who it's from. So just put ICL question, or put bread, or just from one of the ICL student, just something that I know I need to open it. And if you want special recipes, ask me. I have so many bread recipes, I'd be happy to provide some for you. So let's get started with this recipe. And as I said, I'll be using the tools that I like to use when I'm making bread. Okay, the first thing I need to do is to wash my hands and give them a really good scrub. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes after I hand wash. Okay, guess you're supposed to sing happy birthday twice, and I did that. So I think my hands are nice and clean, and I'll be putting my fingers in to test temperature, and I didn't want you to worry about it if my hands weren't clean. So the first thing, it calls for 1 cup of scalded milk. And normally I use 2% milk, but if I'm baking for a competition, or if I really want it to be extra special, then I like to use whole milk. It doesn't make a lot of difference in that final product, but it makes a little bit of difference. So we're going to put this in the microwave, and I'm going to scald it. And you really don't have to scald milk. I started making bread a long time ago when we were still scalding milk. But the reason you scalded was to kill any microorganisms in the milk that could counteract the yeast. And now milk is pasteurized, so those microorganisms are killed. But I still scald it, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. On my microwave at home, 1 minute scalds it. And this I remember from teaching classes in here before. The microwave just kind of takes off on its own. But we'll stop it in a minute. And then it calls for 1/2 cup butter. And for the best product, I like to use butter. And also, I like to use butter because it's better for us than margarine is. Margarine is really like a plastic that is not healthy. Butter's not especially healthy, but it's better for us than margarine. And then I cut it up just a little and put it in the bowl. Oh, that seems like more than a minute here, isn't it? No. Okay. So, put that in, and that melts the butter because it's nice and hot. Okay. Speaking of butter, for baking and for eating at home, we use the butter from Costco. It's about $2.50 a pound. But I read one chef said the best butter is President butter from France or Kerrygold butter from Ireland. Then I read an article in Cooks that said the best butter is Challenge butter. But I guess it's all a matter of personal preference. What I really like, best of all, is to make homemade butter. And that's not hard to do. It's not cost effective. And we go to Costco and I sound like I'm trying to push Costco. I'm really not. We get 1/2 gallon of cream, and I think it's $9.99, Alan, do you know, for a 1/2 gallon of cream? And to get about a cup of butter, you need to put about 3 cups of cream. And I put it in the KitchenAid and put either the paddle or the whisk, either one in, and then it's really messy. So I take a piece of wax paper and slash it and lay it over here because it just splashes all over. Or if you have a cutting mat and don't mind slitting it, that would protect it too, and lay it over it and turn the beaters on and just let it mix for at least 10 minutes and then take a look at it, or you're probably watching it the whole time. Get up to 12 minutes and maybe even a little more, and the butter separates from the liquid. And out of that 4 cups, did I say 4 cups? You maybe get 2 cups of butter. I'm not sure you even get that much. But you also get buttermilk. And I use that buttermilk in cooking when I do that. And then I put a little salt in it while it's mixing, and it makes the best butter. It's the texture, the flavor is so good. You can buy Amish butter, and that's exactly what it's like, at Red Barn. And it's about, I think it's $10.95 for, I don't think it's even a pound. Making butter is not cost effective. It's just that you have something that's really good. So if you enjoy good bread, I suggest you make some butter. Try it. Just be prepared to do something so you don't have a big mess in your kitchen. Okay, now we've put the butter in the milk, and then it calls for a 1/2 cup of sugar. And I'm not fussy about brand of sugar, but if you make a lot of, if you make frosting and candy, you should use cane sugar. Beet sugar doesn't react the same way, and you might not get a good stiff mix with the sugar or meringues. Then you want to use, you want to make sure you use cane sugar. And C&H is cane sugar, but I don't always use a cane. I'll use crystal or sugar. I'm not really particular about my brand. Okay, then it calls for, I believe it's a teaspoon of salt. Oh, but before I do that, I want to I want to proof the yeast. And I washed my hands really well. I know you came in later. We need the water just lukewarm. And I believe the number one reason people have failures with bread is because they proof yeast in water that's too warm, or they add the yeast to ingredients that are too warm, or somehow keep it too warm. Old recipes used to say proof in a warm oven, or proof on a heating pad, or proof someplace warm, and I do not like to proof my bread in a warm place. It gives it a yeasty taste, and it also really slows the action of the yeast. When you add, let me get this in the microwave. Okay, that was not very long, but it's just a half cup. Yeah, that's not too warm. You want the water and the ingredients to be between 110 and 115. If it were too warm, the yeast would react right away and start rising. But you've killed some of the action of the yeast at first, and then when you add to the other ingredients, it's slower. By the time it gets in your bread, you might have hockey pucks by the time it's big. So just don't get it too warm. Okay, and I always add just a pinch of ascorbic acid, which is just vitamin C. It gives it something to feed on. Or you can add just maybe an 1/8 teaspoon of sugar, something for the yeast to feed on. And I didn't add very much. If you add too much, it'll make it act too fast, and it makes the bread kind of foamy. Also, I use bottled water. At home, I don't use bottled water. I'm trying to avoid using too much plastic. But we have an RO system at home, so it's purified water. But you want to use purified water. If you have water with chemicals in, it will affect the taste. Okay, so we put the ascorbic acid in, and it calls for 2 tablespoons of yeast. Now here's a product I really like. It's Firmapan, and you can get it at Harmon's, and it's $3.99 a pound. It still is. At Red Barn, it's $10 a pound, and if you send for it from King Arthur, I believe it's $6.99. And for a while, when the virus first hit, I think it was about April, you couldn't even find yeast, and we found some online, and it was, I think, $18 a pound. It was like it was a really prize item, and then there was none in the shelves at Harmon's. And I panicked. I thought, oh my goodness, what do we do if we don't have yeast? But now they seem to have plenty, and it's $3.99 at Harmon's. But I think it's still $10 at Red Barn for the very same yeast. This is a full pound, and you must get at least 35 packages out of this. I'll have to figure that. I think a package is a fourth ounce. Do you know, Dixie? How much a package of yeast? And it's the 3-pack is like $1.69, $3.99, and I know you can get at least 30 tablespoons out of this. So it's so much more cost effective, but it's superior. It's so much better. So we'll put the 2 tablespoons of yeast in. And to get the lukewarm water, I always heat it in the microwave or heat it on the stove. You shouldn't use hot water out of the tap when you're cooking, because that water runs over metal to heat it, and that there's a slight taste. You probably have to be really discriminating to know that, to taste it. And I never use hot water out of the tap for when you're boiling water for noodles or any cooking that you do. I always heat the water, take cold water and heat it. Okay, and then just really beat this up. I took cooking classes from a lady in Monmouth, Illinois, and she says, just like a child, you just have to spank it. So just get it alive here. And you can see it's foaming, and that's called proving the yeast. You're proving that it's it's alive and it's working. There are 130 billion living cells in a tablespoon of yeast. I can't even fathom what that is. I guess you'd say there are lots of cells, living cells. And that's why we scalded the milk, because we didn't want to counteract these living cells in the yeast and kill it. Okay, we're going to let that just foam a little. I didn't add the salt yet. I added the sugar and the butter, and this is salt. Here's another product I really like. We're not from Utah, but I've found some things here that are really good products, and this is one. It's Real salt, and it's more expensive than Morton. It's probably about the same as most sea salts that you buy, but it's from, I think, Salt Lake. I don't have my glasses on to know, but I think it's from Salt Lake, but it's from that region. And I have an article, and if anybody's interested, send me an email, and I will send you the article that talks about this. And it's not a sales article, it's an article from this. It was a cookbook. It was written up in the cookbook. There are no preservatives in this, no chemicals, and it has lots of minerals in it. And this article says that it's actually a positive thing for your blood pressure to use this salt, which was surprising to me. So I believe it's 1 tablespoon of salt. Oh, 1 teaspoon. Oh my gosh. Wouldn't that have been, well, except nobody's going to know. Nobody can taste what I'm making today. So 1 teaspoon of salt. Put that in. Okay. Okay, and our yeast is rising here. We know it's good, and I know it's good because I just opened that package today. And now the next thing, it says 3 beaten eggs. Here's another product I'm really particular about. It's eggs. I really like Eggland's Best Eggs. If you're lucky enough to have your own chickens at home, that's best of all. And when you fed them corn or whatever you have, the good things at home. But I like Eggland's Best Eggs. I was in a competition, this was over 10 years ago, and the competition was making chiffon cake. And chiffon cakes are an old cake back from, I think, the 50s. I don't even remember baking chiffon cakes back then. But this competition was chiffon cake, and every chiffon cake has 8 to 10 eggs in. Have you ever made a chiffon cake? Yes. Yeah, they're a pain to make because you have to beat the whites and then the yolks, and you add flour to the yolks and sugar. But I practiced. I made 28 cakes to practice for this competition. And I was trying to make a cake a day, so I'd be really ready for the day it happened. And then I started making 2 cakes a day, but we were just giving them away. And I thought, I just have to quit. I'm spending so much money on Eggland's Best Eggs. I'm going to get some cheaper eggs. My cake was not nearly as nice. It didn't rise as nice. And if you want to do an experiment at home, if you have some eggs at home that are not Eggland's Best, and especially if they're cheaper eggs, and then get an Eggland's Best egg and crack each one in a separate bowl and then compare them. The yolks are a nicer color with the Eggland's Best. Also, when you bake, you should have your eggs room temperature and beat them up, beat them lightly. And that's for, I think, everything. I don't always do it when I'm making cookies, but it's good to do that. Okay, put that in here. And this recipe calls for 3 eggs. Okay. Okay, and we'll put that in. Now, here's something I read. I'm going to talk about some cooking magazines I like, but one of the cooking magazines said there was a really good spatula called GIF. And I looked them up. They were online, and they were $35 for 2. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to spend $35 for 2. And I just couldn't stand it. I I don't spend much of anything but baking, so I bought them. I really do like these spatulas. I don't know that they're worth that much, and at first I regretted it, but I notice whenever I'm cooking, baking, I seem to reach for these spatulas. I seem to like them better. And I'm going to show you something else that my classes always seem to like. You know how it's hard to clean the beaters? If you have a spatula, I don't know if you can see this at home, if you have a rubber spatula, you can buy them that are split like this, but they're quite expensive. So get a less expensive one that's pretty flexible and just cut it and make a little opening to clean your beaters, the whisk. So there's that. Okay. And how are we coming here? We've added the eggs. Anything you can add for me? Okay, good. Okay, we'll add and I'm going to stick my fingers in, they should still be clean, to make sure I'm not adding the yeast to ingredients that are too warm. So we'll add the yeast now. I like my KitchenAid, it does all the hard work for me. I also have a Bosch that I really like when I'm making whole grain bread, and my recipe makes 4 loaves. This can't handle 4 loaves. I think the Bosch does a better job with the heavier bread. But I've had that Bosch for 45 years. This is my 3rd KitchenAid. But it doesn't mean the KitchenAid isn't really durable. We lived in Europe and ran it on one of mine on a transformer, and that wore it out. So KitchenAids are good, and you don't even need a mixer. Okay, you can mix without a mixer, just mix by hand, and I do have a Danish dough hook, which is a handy little tool to have, and you don't need to have this either. Often when we're going somewhere to visit, and there's not much going on, someone will say, will you make some bread? And I like to do that. I can just make bread with a plain old wooden spoon, or you can use a hand mixer. But you have to be careful you don't burn the hand mixer out. Just do lots of mixing in the first half of flour. And when the motor starts bearing down, you stop using your mixer and start doing it by hand, because you can ruin your hand mixer. Okay. I think we're doing just fine here with everything. Okay, now flour. This is not my favorite flour. I just bought my favorite flour. We just came back from Salt Lake City this morning, and we stopped at Lehigh Flour Mills. There's another great Utah product. And the way I found out about it, when we first moved here, we had a neighbor who was a bachelor across the street, and he did a lot of nice things for us. And so I baked bread for him a lot. He loved bread, and I baked bread for him a lot. And he said, oh, have you ever been to Kanab? And there's a little restaurant there on, I don't know which direction, on the side of the street, where they have dinner rolls. And they give you as many dinner rolls as you can eat. And he said they have the best rolls. I said, I'd like to know what their secret is. So I couldn't stand it till we got up to Kanab to try this restaurant. And they came out with the dinner rolls, and they were really good. And I said to the waitress, is there any way you share this recipe? And she said, oh no, we can't do that. So I can tell you, they use Lehigh flour in these rolls. And I think it's just a plain roll recipe with flour and water, a little bit of sugar, yeast, and salt. It's just a very basic recipe, but it's, oh dear. Okay, I'm going to step out. I see something happening here. So I'll go ahead and take it. Thank you. I made bread, rolls, this same recipe this afternoon. And I punched it down we punched it down twice. But I think you can see it. Can you get this, Megan? Can you see the dough? It just keeps rising and rising. So I'm going to shape that for you to see, because this won't be ready to shape, and I didn't want you just to sit here and wait for bread to rise. So, okay, what was I telling you about the dinner rolls? Just a good basic recipe. Also, when I was at Harmon's, didn't used to have Lehigh flour, and they do now, but it isn't from the Lehigh flour bags. It's they divide it up into plastic containers, and they charge about $1 a pound, I believe. You can check me out on that. But we just bought 25 pounds of Lehigh flour, and they have turkey brand and peacock brand. And turkey brand is the high protein. It's the one, it's like bread flour. The peacock brand is what you want to use for cookies, cakes, quick breads, something that you don't care about the gluten, and we'll talk about gluten in just a minute. So I really like Lehigh flour, but I hadn't been up there. We have friends who bring it to us, but she hasn't been back to Lehigh for a long time, so we just got some today. But then another neighbor brought us this, and it's Central Milling, and it's also a Utah flour. I don't have my glasses on, from Logan, and it's really a good flour too. I don't like it quite as well as Lehigh, but they have this at Costco, and I think it's $10.99 for 20 pounds, for two 10-pound bags. If I can't get Lehigh, and if I can't get this Central Milling, I really like King Arthur flour, and it's expensive. I think it's $5.49 for 5 pounds. I still prefer the Lehigh over anything. And if I can't get any of those, if I can't get Lehigh, and I can't get Central Milling, and I can't get King Arthur, I will use Gold Medal. I don't like Pillsbury. I think they have lots of filler in it. And I never use off-brands. And you might have a brand you like, and that's just great. I'd be glad to have somebody tell me something that you like. Now, I sifted this at home. I thought I'm not going to take a sifter and stand and sift for you. So I sifted it at home. And you notice when I dipped the sugar out, I dipped into it. And that's fine because it doesn't settle. But flour settles. So you shouldn't dip into it with a cup. Take a spoon and spoon it in. And that reminds me of something else. You don't have to be really exact with bread. Bread is very forgiving. You can add a little more sweetener, a little less sweetener. You can put in an extra egg. You could get a little too, well, you can't get too, it's not good to get too much flour in because it makes it tough. But we'll try to be as exact as possible. Okay, that was 1 cup. Okay, and we're going to let it mix. And it's good to use a knife. If I were making cookies, I'd be a lot more careful about this. But as I said, with bread, it doesn't matter. Now, if we were making French bread, or we make artisan bread, you don't mix it. You'd let it does its own thing. Or if I were making whole wheat bread, I would do lots of mixing at this point before you add many ingredients. This is when you want the gluten to form. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me. I think you can. The gluten is that stickiness about bread. Think about cookie dough. If you pick up cookie dough and pull it, it comes apart. If you pick up bread dough and pull it, no, it doesn't, because that's the gluten, that's the elasticity. And gluten is 2 proteins that work together. And gluten is not unhealthy. There's kind of a rash of allergies. That's a valid thing to be allergic to gluten. But if you're not allergic to gluten, gluten is healthy. And if you have recipes that are gluten-free, they typically have more sugar in to make up for that lack of gluten. So that's not healthy. Okay, now I talked about this GIF spatula and the one that I split. When you're making bread, it's really hard to work with the softer spatulas, so I have a real firm one here. Someone told me one of the times, last year or the year before, when I was teaching this class, that Ace Hardware has these really firm, not firm, what word do I want? They're hard spatulas, so. I keep thinking I'll go there and check, but I haven't done it. And bread is not really time consuming. It's not labor intensive. The time that's involved is in rising. Probably, we'll check our time here. I started about 5 after 5. I'm taking more time today because I'm talking more. But you can probably mix bread up in 20 to 30 minutes. And then let it rise and shape it. And you can be done start to finish in 2 hours with rolls and bread. Or you can take more time if you want. You can let it set and neglect it. Okay. And you want to be careful that you don't get too much flour in it. If you get too much flour in it, it makes it tough. If you're going to err on getting too much or too little flour, you're better off to have too little and have a really nice slack dough. I don't know if we'll work with this one, but see how slack, it's okay. We'll talk about this one later. Okay, you can see how slack this dough is, and that makes a nicer product. Okay, I'm going to change beaters. I told you that I have had the same Bosch mixer for 45 years, and I have, but the bowl, my old bowl, I think I've gone through like 3 or 4 bowls. And my new bowl that I really like, that cost $169, which is as much as my whole mixer cost with bowls, 2 bowls, no, it was only 1 bowl, but 2 beaters, and the whole mixer cost $169 45 years ago. But I just bought a bowl, and it does not have a whisk. It has only the dough hook. And I missed that first step with the beaters. I wish it had it. And here's another tip. When you're doing anything with flour, soak the dishes in cold water. It makes it so much easier to clean. I'm going to take this over to the sink. If you put hot water on it, it bakes the flour. It makes them harder to clean. But if you put cold water on it, it dissolves the flour. It makes it a lot easier to clean. Okay. Okay, we need to add some more flour. I think it calls for 5½ cups. I put these towels out because it's easier to clean up, just to fold the towels up and shake them out. And by the way, that reminds me of something I read just yesterday. This was a tip, and it was an older woman. She said, I'm older, and I keep my stand mixer back in the corner of the cupboard. And it's hard to get it pulled in and out. So she said she put it on a cotton placemat. And I thought, and it's so much easier than to slide back and forth. Such a simple tip, but yeah, would make it so much easier. I haven't even tried it because I just read it. Okay. And with dinner rolls or cinnamon rolls, sweet rolls, you don't want to knead too much because that develops the gluten. And you want dinner rolls to have a tender crumb, or cinnamon rolls to have a tender crumb. And the more you knead it, the more it develops that gluten and makes it chewy. You want chewy French bread or artisan bread, or I even like my whole wheat bread. I mix it a lot. Okay, I need to take a look at this. Oh, it's getting close here. I should be. Okay, Okay, I can see I have quite a bit of flour down underneath. Okay, well, it's still a little slack, so we need to add a little more flour. I think I've only added 4 cups. And again, you don't have to be real precise with bread. Oh, that might be a little much. Let's take a look here. I need to put this on too. That's, you can hear it bearing down. Okay, that's going to be okay. We're going to quit with that, and I'll do a little bit of hand kneading. If I'm right here, Megan, are we okay? If I can see, I think it is. Is that okay? It's good? Okay. Now, whoops. Here's something I use, I really like having, and it's a kneading mat. And you can buy them from King Arthur. I suppose you can get them a lot of places online. And I've used them for years. When I started using them, I'm gonna spread this out and put some flour on. I washed it every time I used it. And I was just, every time you wash it, of course I'd wash it in really hot water. It was shrinking, and I was going through mats and mats. I thought, well, I don't need to wash them every time. But you can't leave it out with the eggs and the milk. You can't just leave it out. So I keep it in my freezer. And I have 4 mats. I have one, and I put out white rolls, and one I have cinnamon rolls, one I have pie crust, and one I have whole wheat bread. And I use these, I probably use them a couple months before I wash it. And then when I wash it, I do soak them in cold water. They're messy. That's the only thing about them. I never know what to do with that flour water. I put it in the toilet because I don't want to put it down my sink. But I love my kneading mats. So we're going to put the bread on here, the rolls, because I want to show you about hand kneading. Okay. Megan, you're doing a great job. Oh my goodness. Okay. I think this is really nice dough. When we were in Germany with the military, and we were right across from France. So I thought, I want to go to the Cordon Bleu and take a bread baking class. It's nothing to impress anybody. All you have to do is contact them and send them your money for a one-day class. They're glad to take you. You can't do that for the cooking school. I think they're very particular about who they accept for that. But for a bread baking class, it was a nice experience to go with a chef, and we made 4 kinds of bread in a day. But I'll show you something that, I oil my hands. Here's something else I really like, this little squeeze bottle. Well, my hands, and this is plain cooking oil. Okay. So we're not going to need too much because we don't want to develop too much gluten. But when it starts getting sticky, and this is when you're making artisan bread or whole wheat bread or whatever you're making.
Auntie?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I lost your mic.
Well, I did it. I caught it on it.
Okay, yeah, so no one online can hear you. So
Oh, okay. How long has that been?
just since it dropped.
Oh, okay.
Let me see.
Oh, I should be doing this.
Here we go.
I won't breathe. Thank you.
Yes. All right, there we go.
I'll go back, and I think I was telling about going to the Cordon Bleu, which is not any accomplishment. They'll take anybody for a bread class. But one of the things he taught us, and it's the same thing I learned from the lady. I'm done with the mixer, so I'm going to take that cord out. When the bread starts fighting, as the gluten forms, it starts kind of fighting you. You're really struggling with it. Throw it down, and I don't want to throw it too much and get flour all over the kitchen here, but just throw it down like that, and it relaxes it. And they taught the same thing at the Cordon Bleu, but there the chef threw it and would make it go into a long string. Just throw it out like I just did and got flour all over. And you should always let your bread rise in a different bowl than the one you mix it in. I can't tell you why. I don't know what the reason is. I taught classes years ago in Illinois. It doesn't matter where I was teaching the classes, but I had a guy in the class, a young guy, and he said, my grandma makes great bread, and she said, you always have to let it rise in a different bowl. Then I started thinking about it and reading recipes. They always say transfer to a different bowl. So I'm not doing it today because I don't have a different bowl. But then you grease your bowl, put the bread in. It's nice and smooth. I think you can see there, this is really nice bread. It's pretty slack. Okay, and then just grease the top. And then some sources say seal it, cover it with saran wrap. And some say don't seal it, put a towel over it. So I'd say just do it whatever way you want to. Okay. Right. I'm trying not to use much plastic. It's a hard thing to do. I just read that, well, I'm sure you've all heard that it takes 1,000 years for plastic to break down. So I'm trying not to use plastic. I'm doing it today, and when I do use plastic, I'll reuse this same sheet over the rolls when I make them. Or these are really nice. They're sticky, and they form a suction, and it seals the item up, and you can reuse them and reuse them. I also have some bees. Oh shoot, what is it called? It's a bees. It's a honey. It's a plastic coated, but it's not plastic. It's beeswax, and their claws, and you can wash them. But you can't wash them in really hot water, and you can never use them to wrap meat. I got some online, and they were like $42 for, I think there were 7 or 8 of different sizes, and then I saw them at Trader Joe's for $9.99. So you can get them at Trader Joe's, and I've used them and used them, but I know I've rinsed them in water that's too hot, and the beeswax is coming off of them. So there's our bread dough, all made, and this, I'm going to do something with some that I made earlier today. And Megan has me right there so I can work over here. So, okay, let me think if I've forgotten anything. I don't think so. Dixie, help me out. Did I forget anything? Anything you'd like? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, there's a couple of things that you brought out that I was always taught not to put the salt in until the flour was in.
Oh, okay. And you know why? The salt retards the action of the yeast.
Yeah.
But it's okay. And Yeah, yeah, I have heard that too. I add it at first, and when I make my whole wheat bread, the one that's in in the packet, this 4-grain bread, you put oil, honey, molasses, and water, and bring it to a boil. And this flour, this salt is pretty coarse, and sometimes it doesn't break down. So it breaks down better if I put it in that boiling mixture. But I have read that too. I do add it earlier. What else? You said a couple of things. Was there anything else? Well, if you think of it, say.
There were a couple other things that were just very interesting.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, I don't want to get disconnected again. Now, here's another tool I really like, is a bench knife, and I use it a lot. And with bread, I use it to clean the mat. What I'm going to do, we could do dinner rolls, and you can just do all kinds of fun shapes with dinner rolls. You pinch them off, and you should never tear bread. I cut it with that, or use your fingers to tear it. You can just do plain old dinner rolls like this and put them in a cake pan, or you can roll it out. Oh, good, Megan. And make a nice roll. It takes a lot of time, but you can make cloverleaf rolls, little circles, or you can roll this out, and then I have a metal cup that cuts it just right, and then fold them over for Parker House rolls. Okay, I'm going to make a rosette right now. Or you can just do a tie and just leave it like this. I guess you can see that. Or tuck these in and make a pretty little rosette. I guess that shows. So those are dinner rolls. But right now I'm going to do a braid. I like to do a 6-strand braid. It's not a big deal, and you can look online. There are quite a few people who tell how to do a 6-strand braid, and I've done it in class several times. But the problem is it takes so long to roll these legs out. It's going to take me a while to do even 3 legs. And baking, I use a lot of parchment. When you're making cookies and using parchment, you can use the same parchment a couple of times. But, well, I'm going to do this first, and I'll talk about a silicone mat. We're going to do a 3-strand braid, which will make like a Jewish challah. Okay, and these should be about 18 inches is an ideal length. At home, I have a little electronic scale that I use, so they're exactly the same length, but I thought I'm not going to take one more thing. We have enough stuff here. And for temperature, most recipes say about 350. My 4-grain bread, if you look at that recipe, and that's my all-time favorite recipe, the 4-grain bread. And sometimes I call it 6-grain, or sometimes I call it 7-grain or 8-grain, depending on how many grains I add. And every time I add a seed, I call that another grain. But and then I also often put dried mashed potatoes in my bread. And in the old days, I used to use potato water a lot. But I don't know, we hardly ever have mashed potatoes these days, so we don't have potato water. But that is nice for the texture and the flavor of bread. We want these as, much the same size as possible. This one's a little fatter. And have them nice and smooth. Okay, 1, 2. And people often say, oh, if I made so much bread, I'd really be fat. And I'm not a good specimen at all by any means, but it's not because of bread. If you crave chocolate, sometimes it's because you're lacking, I think it's riboflavin. It's one of the B-complex vitamins. So if you're eating bread, you're getting all those B complex vitamins. And I think bread's very good for us, especially whole wheat bread. White bread, not so much. White flour is not so good, but good for us, but it does taste good. Okay, how am I doing here? I need them the same thickness as much as possible. Oh, and I forgot to talk about something else. This is a French bread bowl. And again, you don't have to have a French bread bowl, but the shape of it is really conducive to bread rising. It climbs up the sides. It's a good shape to have. And I just don't see them. I've had that for years and years. Okay, I'm going to do a 3-strand braid. I don't want to lock that flour off and have a big mess. Okay, what I was going to talk about is a silicone baking mat. These are so nice. I think they're about $16.99, but you can use them and use them and use them. Reuse them, rinse them in hot soapy water, and you can also use parchment paper, but I love these silicone baking mats. I make cookies on it, biscuits. Okay, to make okay, we have them about equidistant, and as just gently, oh my goodness, gently work it. You don't want to stretch it, because if you stretch it as it bakes, it's going to get all out of shape. You just want to let it kind of form its own way, and make sure you tuck this under really well, because otherwise you'll have arms sticking up when you bake your bread. Okay, now we'll do this side. And you should have an egg wash. With whole wheat bread, I use egg yolk mixed with a little milk. And with white bread, egg white. This is not going to be nice and even, but then we squeeze it up here. This isn't a perfect braid, but okay. Okay, and where was my saran wrap? Oh, I used it on here. We'll take this off here. So you put the egg wash on right before you bake it. And just brush it on. Be really careful that it doesn't pool. Otherwise you'll have baked egg around it. So just brush it lightly. Or with French bread, you can just brush it with plain water, and that crisps it. Or set a pan of hot boiling water, or with the artisan bread. Okay, and not with this bread, but with artisan bread and with whole wheat bread, I like to put seeds on the top. And when you do an egg wash, that gives some place for the seeds to stick to the bread. So I'm going to have to use a little more plastic, because we don't want it to dry out. Okay, so we've shaped bread. Oh my goodness, we have been about 55 minutes. But we made bread, we've shaped bread, and we have bread rising here. So I could let that set in the refrigerator overnight. I have to be really careful though, because it's pretty active and you want to check it. You don't want to open your refrigerator and find out you have bread dough all over, running all over. I might set it in a plate. I'll probably go ahead and bake this one tonight. Now for next week, well, I'm doing this semester a little different. I think next week what I'll do is bring in kitchen tools, different kitchen tools and equipment that I really like. And then I'll see if somebody sends me a message. Or Dixie, you have my email too. Just say, would you talk about, I'd love to do some research. It's fun for me to do research. Talk about making quick breads or techniques with cookies, or just to experiment with it. And I actually have a book from Cooks, The Science of baking and cooking. So that would be fun for me if you have requests. So that's what we'll do, and then I'll bring in 2 different techniques all baked. I don't think I'll do any mixing the next time. And then the very last time, we'll see if you want me to do holiday bread with a filling. Oh, I was going to do something else. Oh, here, I can do something else very quickly. I'll show you another braiding technique that I like. I don't have my rolling pin, which I'd like to have, but we'll shape this out. This is an easier braid, and you can get it perfectly symmetrical. And if you have a filling, I have a really good cream cheese. I think it's in your recipes, a sour cream cheese-filled braid that's delicious. And I do it in this. You want it to be about 9 by 14. And then cut the sides. Cut on the right, directly across on the left, about an inch apart. Oh, and it doesn't matter how far apart. You could do it close together and you have a closer braid, but I like it about this far. And you could do a poppy seed filling in here, an apricot filling, a prune filling. You can, whatever you like, okay? And then fold the arms over. I don't know if you can see that, Dixie. Can you see a screen at all?
Yeah, it's right here on the TV.
Okay. Oh, good, yeah. Okay, and make sure you get the arms tucked in, because when it bakes, they'll start popping up, and then you don't have your nice, pretty braid. But this is a lot easier than that, because it's hard to keep that one nice and symmetrical. And if there's a filling in it, it's a lot easier. Okay, and then tuck the end under. Oh, and something else, when you're making dinner rolls, rock them. And that makes them settle. Or your loaf of bread, rock it. Okay. And by rocking it, I mean doing this. And that makes it settle evenly. Okay, so there's another braid. We'll just slide it right in here. So, if you'll send me an email, and all of you out there in video land, I'd love to have requests. I'd love to have questions. It tells me you're interested and you want to bake bread, and that's what I like. I think that's one of, especially now with the virus, there's really been just a rash of bread baking and articles in magazines and newspapers about baking bread, and especially artisan bread, like you were saying, Dixie. Okay, I think we're done for today. Unless, Dixie, do you have anything you'd like to mention or talk about or ask about or tell us? Any tips you have?
Well, I just enjoyed your tips. I mean, some simple things. You talked about the sugar. I thought that was great. Really, when my bowl, I put it in the sink, and I've always just put hot water in it when I'm going to clean it. So now that's great, because now I can go home and try it with cold water.
Cold water.
I'll be much happier with that.
You know, and something, I have to read everything. I never think anything up myself, but it just, it dissolves. The cold water dissolves that flour. It doesn't bake it on. So, okay, and I'm sure when I get home tonight, I'll think about things I meant to tell you, but I can tell you next time. We'll meet again on the 28th of October. And my plan is, unless somebody sends me a note and says, would you please do, your wish is my command. Right now I have the time and the interest, so let me know what you'd like me to make and what you'd like to do, and what recipes you'd like. We can have the recipes online, or I can send them directly to you if you're the only one who wants it, or we can post it through the ICL office. They'll post anything. So it's been my pleasure, and I hope you all make bread. I'd like to know about it. Thank you.